Let's do the things that work and we know people love, but let's make them feel a little bit different. Let's give them a twist.
As a designer, there's always this two sometimes competing ideologies. What is the most functional? What is the most useful? And what is the most awesome looking?
Recognize that a lot of the images you're seeing may not exist in reality. They may have special lighting and filters, or they may not even be real. You could look for 1,000 years and never find the perfect image. So try to narrow it down to 3 that really appeal to you. People have great taste. They just don't always know how to put it together. My approach is you really need to see things hands-on, and you really need to be there with the person building it so that you understand what they're up against.
I'm super excited to have this conversation about design because I talk a lot about financing. We talk to syndicators, investors, but we rarely talk about design, architecture, and things that happen before the building's built. So welcome to the show. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I have lots of ideas, and I hope that they're helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, I would love to hear them. So tell me, please, are we going to be seeing white shaker cabinets for much longer?
What a great question. You know what? White shaker cabinets in my world, in the design world, because I get bombarded by hundreds of images a day, have kind of been out for a little bit, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't use them because white shaker cabinets give us a feeling. They give us a clean, fresh, bright feeling. So as an investor, I would not say no to white shaker cabinets. Don't think that you are beyond them. I'd rather see you still put in white shaker cabinets, and then we'll add some warm elements to modernize it in other ways.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so let's get right into it. As I said, white feels clean, but what I can do with white is I can add so many different wood accents. So one of my favorite things is to actually have a different island. This is a great tip for investors because you can either paint an island or you could use like a warm wood island. Now you have a kitchen that still has all the white brightness that people are drawn to, but you have that light oak is so popular and you can put that on the island. People are afraid to put that next to wood floors. You shouldn't be afraid. Do it thoughtfully, but it's okay for the woods to be next to each other and not exactly the same. They just need to be harmonious. As I said, you could paint also a wood countertop in certain situations. Now, if this is a rental property, I am not recommending a wood countertop. But if you are selling, I do think a wood countertop on an island to make it almost like a table, that is a trend we're seeing. We're seeing islands get a lot more like big kitchen tables, and that warms up a space, feels so modern and really affordable for an investor. I mean, much more affordable than putting in marble.
That is very interesting. So in my world, we're always trying to predict, and we do build a lot of properties where, we have to figure out what the ultimate owner, buyer of this property is going to want and like. We do some rental properties too. And obviously different things go into consideration there. But one thing that I've always been known for, and my team always laughs at me for that, is I'm like, let's do something a little bit different than stupid farmhouse sinks and barn doors or white, because everybody's doing it. I'm like, can we do something that's better? But then the argument that I get is, look, we know that people like it, people buy it, so why would you change it?
So that's why my theory is, and this applies to designing your own home, let's do both. Let's do the things that work and we know people love, but let's make them feel a little bit different. Let's give them a twist. I think that's really attractive to buyers because buyers want to step out of their comfort zone a little bit, but they don't want to step out totally. They want to be able to bring the furniture from wherever they're coming from most of the time, and they don't want it to look weird in this different house. So look, I'm not saying only white shaker cabinets. They're not necessarily my favorite cabinets, but I don't think that developers should be scared of putting in white shaker cabinets. I just want them to do it thoughtfully. I want you to think about, okay, if I'm still using this thing that people love, and it's a very permanent thing, the kitchen, how can I infuse something really different? So whether that's, we talked about countertops, but also think about the backsplash. This is an opportunity to put something in that's really different, that really grabs a buyer's attention. I love a slab stone for a backsplash. I'm partial to it, but there are so many great options out there. And Please give your investment property some life. Give it something different, but let's just take it one notch up instead of being so crazy that it's going to be hard to find the right buyer.
I definitely agree with that. It's interesting how you walk different apartment buildings and you basically recognize the same patterns. You walk different condos and you recognize
Hmm.
the same different, but within the condo world, they're very similar. And then you walk through single family
Right.
homes and those are all over the place. The recent trend is, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, is kind of like this transitional style where people still like their
Hmm.
craftsman, but they don't really like the old 90s craftsman. They want something with a more
Right.
contemporary. What's your approach when you're meeting with a new person or when you're trying to design the space and you don't know who the customer is? How would you approach that?
Living room design formula. That's on Amazon. I put all these questions in to really get people's minds going. Here's what I'm thinking. I don't think you should cast this huge wide net. Oh, this condo could be for a single man, or it could be for an older couple, or it could be for a family of 5, or it could be for this. I think you should really direct that. Now, hopefully we have some overlap, but have an idea who is likely to be buying this place, who is likely to go in there, and then answer those questions for them. If they have little kids, they're probably going to go toward different things, of course, than The Bachelor will say. So my advice is whether you're working on your own home or whether you're building for someone else, ask the questions. Who lives here? What time of day are they in this space? How do they use it? What do they need most?
Right. And that's exactly what we do when we plan a space. If we're building a single family home for sale, then we still have our avatar, our client avatar, who, if it's a
Great.
4 bedroom, 5 bedroom home, it's likely going to be a family and it's likely going to be a working professional, most likely either one of the spouses or both are working, kids are, various ages. So we try to build this avatar. Who's buying in the area? Is there a huge influx of international buyers in the last several months? Or is Amazon hiring 10,000 more people and they're all
Right.
flying in to this area from other parts of the world? I am wondering,
Right.
as a designer, there's always this two sometimes competing ideologies. What is the most functional? What is the most useful? And what is the most awesome looking?
It's funny because people say that to me sometimes, and this is the way I like to live life. Why can't we have both? We can have both. I say have your cake and eat it too. So you just gave me a really interesting thought, which is, I work with a lot of families and you are building single family homes. I imagine there are people listening who are flipping houses. I imagine there are people listening who are trying to become a larger scale developer. Either way, here's a tip. The mudroom is a really important spot in a home. Kids only have more sports gear than they used to, right?
I have three.
I do. So I build a mudroom for sports. We're still busting out of it. But the reason I bring this up is because you just mentioned how do we have to choose between looks and do we have to choose between function? My assertion is that if we are thinking through this and so many people listening to this are in that build process, we don't have to choose. I can plan ahead. I can say, you know what? There might be an ice hockey player in this family. So there needs to be a cabinet that is at least 72 inches tall and 24 inches deep. We need to have at least one of them in this mudroom. So I think you're in such a great spot as a developer to build the beauty and function in before you even start. And if you're referring to those like kind of funky things, maybe we stay away from like the really funky things.
That's right. I like that. How do you find inspiration? These days, there's so much information out there. There's, I would imagine back in the days, there'd be your conferences and magazines. Today, there's internet, AI, and your average couch designer.
Yes.
How do you educate your clients on what is actually good versus what is super temporary?
This is such a good topic because it has changed dramatically just since I started 15 years ago. When you think about what the internet has given us in the past 15 years is crazy. I started on catalogs, and if you wanted something, it was a whole custom process, and now that can all be visualized on the screen. So first of all, how do I get inspiration? Well, I'm getting inspiration all the time. I love design. I want to look at lots of images. But even me, even someone who does this, 24/7 basically, I get overwhelmed. I get inundated with the images. And then the next level is now we have AI, which is incredible for interior design, has so many tools that I barely could have imagined when I started, but it also does have some challenges that we need to really be thinking about. When you're visualizing a piece of furniture online, a lot of companies now will kind of let you put the fabric on and see how it will look. But what I know from doing this is that it doesn't really give you a true visualization. My point is, for everyone listening out there, use all of those sources, but use them carefully. Recognize that a lot of the images you're seeing may not exist in reality. They may have special lighting and filters, or they may not even be real. They may be AI generated. It's hard to tell. When I'm working with a client and I show them a photo and they're like, "Ooh, I love that," I don't just say great and put it in the file. I go, "Okay, what do you like about this?" Sometimes I'll say, "Do you like the chandelier?" And they're like, "Oh, I hate that chandelier." I mean, if I didn't ask that question, I may have shown them the chandelier in the exact chandelier, because I love everything. So ask yourself these questions. Limit the amount of images that you're using for inspiration, whether it's in your own home or in your development work. You could look for 1,000 years and never find the perfect image. So try to narrow it down to 3 that really appeal to you. Maybe even give yourself a timer, like 20 minutes. Okay, these are my favorite 3. And then I want you to really write down, what is it? Oh, I like the way these chairs look, or I like the way this kitchen is laid out. Make sure you understand what you like about the image. I get inspiration from everywhere. I get it from Pinterest. I get it from Instagram. I get it from everywhere. But my advice for anyone listening is use these sources to get your inspiration, and just really think through and make sure you're getting the right amount of information for you and not getting overwhelmed, because it's so easy to do.
It truly is. I still remember a few years ago, we were working on a project, and we were looking at all of these various cool pictures, and the clients would show us images and they would absolutely love the picture. And what we were only guessing is that they probably liked the way the photograph was made, the lighting, because of the composition. In many cases, when we would have our Eastern European rendering company create a nice 3D rendering of the new design, where they would essentially be replicating that inspiration image, we would all look at it and we're like, it's not as cool as that photo
What
was,
is that?
because it's not composed the same way.
Right.
Like, all of those little elements make such a huge impact on our brain. So
They really do.
it's hard.
That's an interesting thing about what I do, is I find people have great taste. They just don't always know how to put it together. And that's actually where I feel I excel. Is it's not about what I like or about what the client likes. It's about the process. That's why I put together my book, The Living Room Design Formula, because I wanted to show people, if they go through this process, they'll get the outcome they desire. They just have to take the steps, rather than what we are commonly doing, which is, oh, I like this photo, so I'm going to buy this. And that doesn't always translate. So the book kind of gives us some safeguards to make sure that what we are picking also works well in the space.
Yeah, that sounds like a great tip. If there's an actual process to the design that could help people arrive to what they want to see, I think that could save a ton of time and a lot of heartburn between the clients and designers out there. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And hopefully the designer is already going through it. But if you want to do it on your own, you can go through these steps. The problem is, I think we think because we're homeowners that we should know how to design, but that's not a skill that just comes to us. Like if I need to build a deck, I understand how a deck is built. I get that I need wood and I need to build a frame, but I wouldn't just go do it. I would get some help. I would figure out like some plans. We don't approach design that way because we just think, oh, it's just some furniture. It's not a big deal. But if you value a space that you love, it makes sense to go through the steps and to learn all that information. And it's the same with real estate development. I know you're doing it on a much larger scale, and you have so much experience with what people are attracted to. So you probably already take steps through the process, I imagine.
It is, but what's interesting is that we don't have it written down. It's sort of all in our heads, right? Like if you ask me, how do you design an apartment building? I don't have a manual to give you. I'm actually working on a book myself right
Right.
now to create the manual.
Ooh,
For the past 20 years, it's just kind of
fantastic.
no. But what's interesting is I went through the process not too long ago with my wife. We were designing interiors for our own place. And I'm like, "Pff, this
Mhm.
is easy. We don't need a designer. I know all the suppliers. I know all the cool
Doing it all
brands,
day.
all the cat. Like I can
No
visualize,
offense, you guys are the worst because you know so much.
right? And it was hard. I'm like, I took my wife to a tile shop. I'm like, look, we don't need designers. Let's just go look at the tile. We can pick out the tile for this bathroom.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think we spent 3 hours there and we didn't make a decision.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh,
The
I
end,
do marriage counseling too. I always tell my clients that because there's inevitably a disagreement. It's much harder to do this with your spouse. It's much harder to do it for yourself.
tell me about your work with architects, if you ever interact with them, and
Mm.
how does that flow?
I do interact with architects, and the flow depends. It really changes with the job. I have worked with some fantastic architects around here. My feeling is architects, and same thing for contractors, when there is a relationship where the architect, the contractor, the designer all respect what each other brings to the table, the project turns out beautifully. When the architect or the designer or the contractor tries to overstep and do what the other one's supposed to do, it really degrades the overall product. Working with a good architect and a good designer and a good contractor, if they want to work together, they will have the best work and they will make the most money and the client will be the happiest. So, my overall experience is I try to set the tone very early on. When I'm working with an architect, when we're there, I set the tone. I say, okay, here are some of my ideas. Now, look, I know I'm not the expert. I'm very clear. I am not the expert when it comes to X, Y, and Z. Here's my expertise. This is what I have in mind. I would love if what you're doing affects this, please tell me because I will adjust based on your expertise. And I also don't really let them step too much on what I'm doing if they start saying, oh, well, maybe we should build it so that your seating area should go there. I appreciate your input, but I'm taking charge on the seating.
Very good point. Yeah, we've experienced a lot of friction between these professionals. And I feel like a lot of the architects that we work with, they really wanted to do the interior design, but for one reason or another, they didn't get that
Mhm.
scope. And then the client brought in, or we brought in a different interior designer. And that's when the friction began. And then the contractor steps in and says, you don't need those idiots. They don't know what the hell they're doing. This is going to cost too much money. I can get you the cheaper shit. And, let's go buy this material and I'll take you to the
Yep.
supply house. And it snowballs.
Have you ever been in a situation where the contractor kind of is like, oh, I can do this, and like it worked out well?
Yes and no. And the reason I'm hesitating is I used to own a construction company. So I actually just officially shut it down. It
Business.
was my project manager, right?
Yeah.
It's been challenging. What I like doing when we ran construction is I would tell the designers is give me a design intent, but don't bother specifying materials because what we found is
Love
that
that.
designers tend to specify expensive materials and get
We
a
do.
design intent. If you tell me what you want it to look like, and if you show me this $5,000 faucet, I can usually send somebody to a supply house and say, find me something that looks like this, but that costs half a third or, quarter of
Right.
that price. And we can usually find it. Now, we explain to the
Right.
customer that, look, the quality may not be the same, but this material offers you, 1 year, 5 year, whatever, 10-year warranty. If it breaks, swap it out. Or if
Right.
it breaks, you save so much money in the first place, you could swap it out. Now, in a rental
And let's
property,
be honest, some of the most expensive faucets I've had have had problems before.
exactly.
Usually it's better to spend more, but it's not a guarantee.
What I am frequently being accused of is trying to save money on materials when I shouldn't be.
Mhm.
And it's just because I've seen expensive stuff and I've seen cheap stuff and I've seen inexpensive stuff that is not bad looking. Like I usually say, I love freaking IKEA. Just because I know it's inexpensive, I know it's generally good looking stuff. And you know what?
Mhm.
If it breaks in your first move, well, go buy yourself a new one. A lot of
You're
times I'm
talking to, I never regret spending more. right? I've never been like, oh, I wish I hadn't spent the money on that. I only have regretted not spending more. But I'm thinking from an investment perspective, it is a waste to spend money on certain things. I have a few examples that I prepared for today. One is marble tile, like in a bathroom. The tile has gotten so good. They print tile now, and it has gotten so good just in the past 5 years that you can barely tell the difference, and it's way more durable to use
Right.
a porcelain or a ceramic marble look tile. Here's a trick that hopefully is useful to some listeners. I like to use the 48 inch by 48 inch format, which your contractor will hate you, but it looks so good. It looks like a slab, these huge tiles, 48 inch by 48 inch. They look like Carrera. They cost a fraction of the price. And unless you are doing this super high end design for, unless 10 plus $1 million customer, they're going to love that tile. They're going to love that they don't have to worry about dripping hair dye on it. Your client is going to love it and it looks amazing. I also think the master bathroom is a great place to use it because it looks high end, but you're not having dinner parties there. So, you don't need it to be like the real marble like you might want in your kitchen. You're not entertaining. So you are the one that gets to enjoy the look and you don't have to worry about people like, is this real marble? So that's one of my tips that I put together for today.
I love it. In our office a few years ago, we called it a swear jar. Every time somebody says the word cheap, they would have to throw $20 in the swear jar. And the reason for that was we don't do cheap stuff. We would look for more economical solution, an inexpensive solution.
Value.
But cheap implies
Yes.
bad quality. And our goal was to deliver the
Right.
highest possible quality, but in a more economical way.
Well, I love that. And I think that's who you want to build your house. You want someone who's really thinking about that because I would love to buy a house that looks amazing, but I don't necessarily want to spend $10 million. So I want someone like you who's really going to think through, okay, what looks good? What's still durable for the client, but I can save them some money here. I think it's a great way to go.
So, looking into the future, because we're designing a lot of spaces that are going to be delivered, 2 years from now, sometimes 3 or 4 years from now, depending on the size of the
Right.
building. The permitting timeline is, 1 to 2 years plus another 2 years to build a multifamily building. How do we know what's going to be in 4 years from now as we're
Mhm.
going through the design?
Well, of course, no one knows for sure, but there are some things that I have found over the last 15 years really have not changed. And it's funny that we started with the white shaker cabinets because I have long asserted that the reason that we liked where that came in style is because of the feeling it gives, right? So I don't necessarily need a home to have white shaker cabinets. It might not be my first choice, but I want that feeling. I want that feeling of a kitchen that feels clean and bright and happy. So if you're making choices that feel clean and bright and happy, they're not going to go out of style. There might be choices that become more in demand, but there are certain things that never go out of style. I also find if something is truly beautiful to most people, stays in style. It really does not matter what the trends are if people value the beauty of it. So I often find that with rugs, that rugs can last, a really good rug, a high quality rug can last a long time. But
Right.
so that would be my advice is if we're focused on the feeling, if we're focused on what room is it, how do we want this room to feel, your choices, if they reflect how you want the room to feel, they will be in style. People will still like them. And then I love doing a few little tweaks. I think you can do so much with, colors change so much. I can change pillow colors so easily. I can do an accent wall with wallpaper. I can change all these things without making a huge investment, but then I can really stay on top of what we're seeing. And also, it allows my clients who are living with it to enjoy it for 5 or 10 years and then we switch it up again.
Does it make a difference to do I don't know, like focus groups or to survey people to find out what the trends are? Or would you rather go with like a Steve Jobs approach that customers doesn't know what the hell they need, so you got to tell them what they want?
That's such a good question. I would go with the Steve Jobs approach. My experience is that, look, I'm all about creating a space for a family, but they don't know what they want. They have an idea, but I think I am better at showing them what they want than they are at finding it themselves. And that's why in the book, I go through a whole process of how you can find what you like and narrow it down. So I would say I wouldn't do focus groups. I would save money. I think you would do better. So this is one of the things I wanted to suggest is designers, we can complicate things. I can admit that. Here is the most economical way to use a designer. When you're at a critical point in your plan, whether that's, the layout or staging or whatever it may be, bring in a designer for 1 or 2 hours. They can give you all of these great tips and then they leave. And as designers, we love it because we don't want homework. We don't want to have a lot of stuff to do when we get home. When someone brings me in for a consultation and they take notes on what I say, they are getting the best value because I will give them all of the ideas and then they can go do it themselves. I send them a bill for a couple of hours and everybody wins.
And I think the most important part that every client should know and remember, and they need to trust the designer. If they spend the
Thank
time,
you.
if they spend the time to interview probably several different professionals and they decided to work with you, Amy, or anybody else, just trust their opinion because designers usually have a reason for why they're recommending certain things and they have experience. And if you to get their advice, then listen to their advice. I think the worst thing that can happen is when you hire a professional and then do not take their advice and then go another route. But because the end result isn't going to be what you ultimately would want.
It's so true. And you know what? That happens in your own home too, because when you're going through the process of design, you are kind of committing to things along the way. And you have to trust the research you did 6 months ago and not be second guessing everything. It's the same thing with hiring a designer, working with a developer, whatever it may be, an architect. You have to trust that what you did made sense. It's very easy. Everyone goes through a point when they're working on a room, they go through a point where they go, I don't know if this is right. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is wrong. I can almost time when the client's going to call. Like I see them call, I'm like, oh, yep, that sofa's in, but the art's not up yet. They haven't seen it. And that's when I'm just talking them off the ledge. Trust the process. If you feel this way, we can tweak things later, but I want you to live with it for a few days. You need to give yourself that pep talk if you're working on your own home or if you're working on development. I already thought through this. I'm going to trust the process. It's all going to come together. And it always does, doesn't it?
Exactly. My mom always used to say, don't show half finished work to an idiot. Because she's like, look,
I
wait
love your
until it's
mom. That
finished.
is so great. Yes. And it's hard in your own home because you're living there and you're like, well, that sofa looks weird. Well, yes, it looks weird. We haven't gotten the coffee table or the chair or whatever goes with it.
Right.
I love your mom. That is great. I'm going to save that. Don't show half finished work to an idiot.
So tell me about the tools. You mentioned AI earlier, and you're probably going to kill me for this question, but you can take a photo of an existing room, upload it to, there's a bunch of sites out there, and it will virtually
Yeah.
decorate, remodel, stage the room for you. Usually looks not bad. How's your manual approach different from AI?
Well, that's a really good question. No, I will not kill you for asking that question because I want people to think about this. There are so many great tools, and I say use them. Use them for the fun part, use them for the inspiration part. Recognize that at this point, and I hope this changes, but at this point, AI is not there yet. It cannot get that feeling of being in your room, and it certainly doesn't know exactly what you need. And it certainly doesn't know how the light's going to come in, and it can't take all of these things into account. So those are amazing tools for inspiration. I use them all the time. I highly recommend them. But in the book, The Living Room Design Formula, I do say use these for inspiration, but I don't recommend that you use these tools when it comes to actually putting together your concept. because what I find is they can lead you down the wrong road. So they might show you something that looks great, and it's like, well, I can't change the dimension of the room or the architecture of the room, or if you're using existing furniture, I can't just stretch it in real life. So we want to make sure that those are our great tools for inspiration, but we're sticking to the manual approach for the reality of ordering furniture and installing wall coverings and all those fun things.
Great answer. Uh, one other question I have is, in my world, we try to get, and we didn't always used to do that, but now we try to get as complete of a construction set before we start the work, before we start construction. What happens a lot of times with many designers is they come up with great ideas, they create great sketches, even list of specifications, or renderings, and it all looks great, but there's still a path between a nice rendering and an actual set of drawings that you could hand over to the contractor and say, build that. What is your
Right.
approach? What is your process for that?
I like to be there when it comes to building something specific. So when we're talking about a whole house, of course, that's very different. If I'm working on one room, I want some time with that contractor to look through things because, to your point, you can have the best specifications in the world, but when it comes to the actual nuts and bolts of it, things always come up that you can't always anticipate no matter how long you've been doing it, and things look a little bit different. Same thing goes with furniture. I recommend in the book that, yes, we map out the furniture on a piece of graph paper, but then I want you to take blue tape. I want you to put it in the room because I want you to really get that feeling. What's it going to be like to walk around the sofa here? All these things. So there's nothing like that in-person interaction. I don't really do any remote design anymore. I used to do it a lot. The reason for that is there's something different about being in the space and feeling the space. My approach is you really need to see things hands-on, and you really need to be there with the person building it so that you understand what they're up against, so that you can come to a conclusion that all parties will be happy with.
One of my pet peeves is when detailed details are not very well coordinated. Like, for example, an electrician laid out outlets in the kitchen the way the code requires, and then the designer specified backsplashes and cabinets and everything, and then the gets the set of plans, and there's no dimensions where the outlet is supposed to be. The electrician is roughing for the receptacles per code, then they cover the walls, and then the designer comes in and says, "Oh, outlets here above the cabinet." And we're like,
Yeah,
well, that needs to be documented in the
right,
elevations. The architects needs to be in the room with the electrical
right.
engineer, with the plumbing engineer, with the mechanical engineer, and not necessarily in the same room, but the plan needs to be coordinated. It
But
happen.
maybe in the same room. You know what?
Sometimes
It's
maybe in the
so
same room. Yeah.
funny you say this because I actually think that's the biggest challenge. I mean, we're all guilty of it. As the designer, and I'm sure as a contractor, you're expected to be the expert on every single thing, right? So, like, I have a lot of information on lighting that I don't necessarily think is my skill set, right? Like, I'm not an electrician, but I've learned over the years that I can't trust the electrician to put the outlets where they should go or use the correct color, temperature light bulb. So I've had to become an expert on that. And you've done it enough time. I've done it enough times that I know to make sure they know that I'm ordering a special system that goes under the cabinet so they can plug in anywhere. But when you're still new, you think like, well, the electrician's the expert on that. Like, he should be saying to me, which type of outlet do you want? So a meeting, and I've talked about this, I was on a construction podcast recently, a meeting where everyone is there to actually value each other's input and to really get on the same page is the best idea ever. I don't know how it could happen because I know we're all running around 7 different directions. But really, if there could be a sit down where we just go through each element, I think it would save so much time on the job. I think it would save tens of hours if we could have a 1.5 hour meeting where we really go through these things and they could come up so that no one's missing something.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Let me know if
Project
it works.
Right, right. No, I mean seriously, it rather than drafting an RFI and then sending it full circle and then waiting a week for it to come back between 5 different engineers, coordinated by the architect. A lot of times,
Right.
just an on-site meeting to go through the questions, document them, and my main thing is do it early. Don't wait until your final fixture
Yes.
installation to have the meeting. Have
Right. Well, and sometimes I don't even get the question from the electrician until the rough-in, and then I'm on another appointment.
right.
So, I'm like, just a second, and then I'm like, well, no, of course, you've worked with me before. You know I wouldn't put that kind of outlet in. It is the communication. And I do think there's an ego thing that happens from all parties. That's one of the things that we were talking about on the construction podcast is he's like, look, contractors, we have egos. And I was like, well, designers do too. We don't want to admit that we don't always think of all these things. So we're kind of like, oh, well, you should know, or you should ask me.
Right.
If we could have a meeting where we all kind of agree, like, okay, we all have our expertise, and like, I need you to help me with this, and I need you to help me with that. Like, I think it could really help make the job easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially contractors, a lot of times, the bigger, the grislier the guy, the more sensitive he is. It's so funny.
Yeah, it happens.
Right.
I've had words with some of my favorite contractors.
Amy, what else is super important that you want to cover that we haven't talked about before?
Well, I just had a couple things I was thinking about that I was like, if I could just tell developers this could make them more money. So one is lighting. This is what I want them all to know is in almost every space, I want to put some sconces. I want some wall lights. I want an opportunity to do that. Also, sconces in particular, it's one of the biggest bangs for your buck. I can get a very affordable light fixture and it looks like $1,000,000. A sconce over a picture frame, that elevates a house to me. So whether it's a multifamily and it's just in a hallway or a huge mansion, think about adding more sconces. I believe that you will find that people feel that really elevates your work. And one of the things I do with clients and also online is I'm all about a gallery wall. So that's just taking frames and making like beautiful artwork or photos and putting them kind of in a grid pattern. It takes a lot of new construction have big open walls that feel just cavernous. We can use really affordable frames. IKEA has great frames. If you have a sconce over 6 IKEA large Ribba frames, you just made like an art installation for a few $100s. I think that is a major selling point for new construction. So I have a website. It's called gallerywalltips.com. Anyone listening can go to gallerywalltips.com and they can download an instant PDF. And that will give them my instructions for a gallery. That includes dimensions and my favorite frames. So it's an easy thing to do that will really make your properties really appealing.
I love it. Yeah, every time we walk through a house and we look at blank walls, we're like, well, that's a perfect wall to hang the art, hang our family portraits. There's no
Right.
lighting. And if there's no lighting, it almost becomes pointless. There's
Yeah.
battery-powered solutions, but it's a pain in the butt.
Right.
Yeah. Illuminate all that.
And think about your cost as the developer to put that wire in when the walls are already open and you're already wiring. I can get a great looking fixture on Amazon for $29.99 that looks as good as some of the higher end fixtures. I mean, don't get me wrong, a higher end house would have a higher end fixture. My point is, it's a really small investment. Anyone should consider a gallery wall because it's the type of thing that you don't really do yourself. I'm just going to come up with this gallery wall. If you have a plan, if you download the PDF at gallerywalltips.com, it's going to lay out exactly about how many frames you should get, about how far apart you should hang them, a recommendation for which frames, and then it is something you literally could do on a Saturday in a couple of hours and get a huge payoff.
That's a great resource. Thank you, Amy.
Of course.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a cool conversation. Like I said, I've been talking to all these investors, syndicators, finance people, and conversation are all very similar, but that's a breath of fresh air. Love it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. It's so fun to talk with you because I love thinking about how design affects people. And I think that you have such a great opportunity to improve people's lives. So, what you're doing is really important. Of course, we want to make money too, but think about how someone feels when they move into your house. I just love the whole process of giving someone a new space.
I think this is wonderful. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you.